Dan Boyd, thanks for spending some time with us. In the primaries, we saw this narrative of a lot of moderate or more conservative Democratic senators being ousted by progressive opponents. How does that play out in the general election, do you think?
Yeah, I think we'll see whether those progressives can, win those seats against Republican challengers in next week's election. And I think it really will shape kind of the Senate's been kind of dominated by this kind of centrist coalition of Republicans and moderate Democrats. And I think we could really see a very different looking Senate come January. There'll be some new leadership positions open. And that could really have an effect on some legislation that's been stalled in recent years and hasn't been able to get through the Senate.
What does that do to senators who probably have a safe seat, but were kind of near that coalition? Folks like Joseph Cervantes and other people who had been so influential.
Yeah, I think it could certainly put a little more pressure on them, knowing that there might not be the backstop in Senate Finance Committee, for example, where John Arthur Smith has been the chairman and then has stopped a lot of bills there. So I think some of those senators could face a little more pressure, a little more, lobbying from progressive groups to kind of go along with some of this legislation. But certainly, I wouldn't expect, there will still be some of those moderate voices, like Senator Pete Campos and Senator Cervantes, you mentioned, likely will win a re-election, both of them. So I think that will still be there, but it won't be in the same numbers or kind of the same strength that it's had in past years.
Okay. In Albuquerque, there are some seats that haven't been in play for years that you're looking at. What are those?
Yeah, we're tracking a few Senate seats in Albuquerque in particular, three that are currently held by Republicans, one by Senator Sandra Rue, one that's held by Senator Candace Gold, and one by Senator Bill Payne, who's actually stepping down this year and not running for re-election. Interestingly, all three of those districts, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump 4 years ago. So I think Democrats see those as opportunities to maybe win those seats, and kind of following in the template of 2 years ago when a lot of Democrats defeated incumbent Republicans in state House races. We'll see if that same kind of tide can also spread across the Senate, and if so, it'll really turn Albuquerque more blue and could turn the Senate even bluer.
We've seen that certainly down south as Las Cruces has kind of grown more blue and more Democrat over the years. In terms of the demographics, when you guys do the journal poll, I know you look at that with Brian Sanderoff. Is Albuquerque turning more blue?
I think certainly it is. I mean, the question will be how blue, and especially I think kind of the wild card this year with turnout appearing so high, who that benefits. I mean, the conventional wisdom would be that might help the Democratic candidates, but I think some of these Republicans are fairly moderate and are well known, so certainly well financed as well, and they're making certainly a strong bid to try to keep those seats. So I expect those races to be close, but I do think Albuquerque, like other urban areas, is shifting further to the left, and we're certainly seeing that reflected here in New Mexico.
You talked about sort of the loss of that bulwark of moderate Democrats in the Senate who sometimes would join together with Republicans. What does that do to policy? I know you're looking hardcore at the election right now, but as you look at the next session, some of the things that the progressives have been pushing, does that make them more likely to pass?
Yeah, I think, depending on what happens in the election, I think certainly it could open the door for something like marijuana legalization, abortion, repealing an old anti-abortion law that's on the books. Those kind of things could be in play, even a measure about the permanent fund, taking more money from that for early childhood. I do think, it could end up being a little more like the House, where it's a little more partisan. I mean, the Senate's been very kind of prided itself on its congeniality and not a lot of personal disagreements. And I think we could see a little more polarization on both sides in the Senate, kind of the progressives and more conservative Republicans, based on those primary results you mentioned. And that could lead, to some of these issues being kind of forced through the Senate, which we haven't always seen in the past, but kind of on a more partisan party line votes.
There's a lot at stake when you describe sort of how everything could play out. We've seen we're talking on Tuesday, and we've seen Republicans already file two high-profile lawsuits against county clerks and the Secretary of State. Can you explain a little bit what's behind those in general? Any specific things that you're noticing there?
Yeah, I think this is probably not totally unexpected. I mean, just given the unique nature of this year's election cycle and the huge deluge of absentee ballots that we've seen. So Republicans are challenging kind of a new provision that was enacted during a special session this summer, kind of whether their poll watchers can observe as poll workers are opening these absentee ballots. And those ballots do include a voter's signature and the last four digits of their social security number. So a little bit of security issues at play there, and exactly how much of the process can poll watchers watch. That's one of the lawsuits. The other one kind of has more to do with these ballot drop boxes and kind of the procedures, for a voter who wants to do absentee but then just drop it off in person. So some of these things are new laws, new rules that are on the books and being put to the test for the first time. So I think there is going to be some friction and some tension about exactly how they're being implemented.
Sure. It was interesting. The second lawsuit that you talked about, the one with the ballot drop boxes, that seemed to be focused on Taos and Guadalupe County. And if you look at political performance, those are two of the most Democratic counties in the state. What is it that you think Republicans might hope to gain? Certainly, they can't have an expectation of winning local races there, it wouldn't seem.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so either. And I don't know exactly the specifics in those two counties, but I think there's a concern, or this could even be laying the groundwork for some future appeals or maybe some, concern about how this election is being handled and carried out by election officials. There is kind of these certain procedures about the ballot drop boxes. But as you mentioned, they're both fairly rural, largely Democratic counties. And, we're not talking about Bernalillo or Doña Ana counties here. So and I think, part of it, these county clerks probably have limited staffing in some of these more, smaller counties or less populated counties. So trying to follow the letter of the law, but also kind of making it work on a practical level in some pretty far-flung places.
Sure. So just kind of getting on the record with some of their objections before the
Yes,
votes start to
I
get
think
counted.
that's part of this.
Sure. Hey, we just have about a minute left. I know the Journal is looking to do another poll before the election. Is that right?
That's right. We'll be doing kind of a final poll, be coming out this weekend, looking at the congressional races, the Senate race, and the presidential race. But this will be kind of a snapshot at where we're headed come Tuesday and what to maybe expect.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to that. And Dan, thanks so much for making yourself available as you kind of keep your finger on everything happening around the state.
You bet. Thanks again for having me on.